Welcome, everybody, to Dauntless Leadership. I am so excited to have Tiffany McLaud of Ultima Health with us here today. She's the CEO and someone whose leadership style I've admired for a long time. Please, if you're with us for the first time, don't forget to find us on your favorite podcast platform, Apple, Spotify, iHeart, and to subscribe. You can also find us at dauntless.works online and watch us. Welcome, Tiffany.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
I usually open the podcast by asking you to talk about your journey, your career journey, and also to tell me, what does dauntless mean to you?
Yeah. Coming on a podcast like that, you think about that word. For me, it means to keep moving forward. There's a kind of a lesson in perseverance, or a message of perseverance there. And actually, one of my favorite quotes is from Walt Disney. It's around here, however, we don't look backwards for very long. We keep moving forward, opening new doors and doing new things because we're curious, and curiosity keeps leading us down new paths. And I really, really love that quote. I say keep moving forward all the time. At Ultima, one of our values is to fail forward, because it's really about learning, and you can't get better and get stronger if you don't fail, because then you haven't learned. So we really try to treat it as a learning rather than a stopping point. And it's about, keeping to move forward. Everything I've done has been as much about my curiosity and what interests me, as opposed to a path or a roadmap of where I was trying to get to. So I love learning, and I love being curious and just kind of throwing myself into different situations. And that's really what I did. I graduated from college, and I actually started off coaching soccer. And I loved that. I loved that. It was very close to obviously how I had grown up playing sports, which was super important to me. But that idea of it's a microcosm of that exact thing, right? You fail on a continuous basis, and you learn and you move forward. I used that to put myself through grad school, which made it free, which was also awesome. And then I got into, marketing and brand management. And, I moved through several different companies, and I learned new things at each step of the way. And I felt like every new door that I opened, it was kind of a culmination of my past with a little bit of learning sprinkled towards the future. So, at Wyeth and Pfizer Consumer Healthcare, it was really about learning marketing and brand management, learning about the consumer. I went over to Reckitt. I really learned a lot more about the P&L. I learned a lot more about excellence and execution, and how to execute efficiently. I went over into the private equity backed world with Fleet Labs. And that was really about, you've got a business that's growing, and how do you accelerate that in a really efficient way. And then I went back to big company. I went to Bayer, and I learned a lot more about leadership and being true to myself, and taking my experience from the past and applying it to very different areas. And now at this role at Ultima Health, it's really about all of those things coming together, and figuring things out as we go, which is pretty fun.
So first, I want to say thank you for sharing that journey. And actually, there was a factoid in there. I didn't know that Reckitt was in between the companies. And that definitely is a financially focused company. And often I find, as I talk to young women, numbers are a little scary, and they're not scary. It's just a question. If you're smart, you can pick this up and learn it as any other tool. And I think we'll talk a little bit about how to make numbers less scary to women. I find with talking to younger emerging leaders, that's often something that comes up. You said two things that are so far, having recorded about a dozen podcasts, a definite theme, a recurring theme. One is just keep going. Move into the future. and don't worry about the past. And I think that's a particularly solid description of how entrepreneurs think about their business, right? You can't let every setback slow you down. There are going to be things where you don't know how to do something. You have to rely on your best judgment and assessment and move forward. And I've loved watching you do that both as an entrepreneur and as an intrapreneur. I've seen you in big companies and small. So that's a topic I want to cover. And then the last that you mentioned is curiosity. And curiosity is clearly a factor, a character trait in someone who's going to become a leader. So I'd love to start there and talk about, how do you see curiosity in your team? I know you develop women and men, and that you give them a lot of leeway and room to be creative. What does curiosity look like to you? How should someone demonstrate that?
Yeah, it's a great question because I think it looks a little different for everyone. I think the first thing is actually, and this was something that certainly came to me later in my career, but a willingness to put yourself out there and ask questions, right? So, early in your career, you really feel like you score points by knowing everything. And later in your career, the way that you actually make a difference is by asking the questions of things that you don't know, because that's where you get the transformational change, right? Like that's where you start to pull different thinking out of people. It's where you identify new opportunities. But it's really uncomfortable because it's that whole saying of like, what you got you here doesn't get you there. So it's a change. So there has to be a willingness to kind of put yourself out there and ask questions that I'll speak for myself. I always like, oh my gosh, I'm going to feel like the dumb person in the room because everybody else already knows this. But putting yourself into that uncomfortable spot, because there's probably somebody else that either doesn't know it or hasn't really thought about it in that way. And you pull out different things. So I think that's really, really important. So it's being willing to kind of be uncomfortable and ask the questions. And then it's allowing yourself the time and space perhaps to not feel like you have to answer something, but contribute with a different question. And that's actually how you can kind of pull other leaders along, is not answering things for them, but asking the questions that they can then solve for themselves.
Excellent. So we talked about curiosity and not being afraid to ask questions, but it is a hard thing when you're junior and at the table and want to look knowledgeable and well prepared. I had another podcast with a CEO that you know well, who said, always be prepared. So how do you balance that? I want to show up looking prepared and thoughtful with I need to demonstrate curiosity and ask the right questions to move a business challenge forward.
Yeah. I think it's about removing that word have to. So you don't have to ask the questions. You need to kind of lean back and allow the space for the questions to come. So I fully believe in working hard and being prepared. It doesn't mean that you're asking question after question. It doesn't mean that you're forcing questions. Years back, Sheryl Sandberg had the book Lean In. And while I believe in the philosophy of lean in, I actually believe that so much comes from leaning back, right? And not feeling like you have to force yourself in, because that becomes such a trap of where you're checking the box for doing an activity as opposed to the intent of the actual learning. So I think taking that pressure off of yourself and just saying it's okay if I do, that would be the first thing that I would do. And then the other thing just about curiosity and failure is, how do you break it down into smaller pieces so it's less threatening? I say all the time, you have to eat the elephant one bite at a time, which is a saying that I don't necessarily love, but I love the thought behind it. And there are big, scary things out there that if you break them into smaller pieces, they're not as scary. So if you say, you know what, I'm going to just take a step back, and it doesn't have to be in the meeting, but I'm looking through this material and I have this question, I'm going to ask the question, just do one thing. It doesn't have to be like this continual thing all the time.
Just do one thing. I think that's a great theme for this podcast.
Yeah.
And maybe that will be the title. I usually end up ruminating on what should be the title of the podcast. And right there, that's one. But so is the Disney quote. So who knows? I think one of my problems, certainly younger in my career, and probably still today, is I always have a bias for action. I always want to jump in and say something and do something. And I don't lean back enough. And I think leaning back helps you really understand and have a wider purview of a situation. I worked on Baby Center right after J&J acquired Baby Center, and they didn't really know how to integrate this West Coast tech startup with the East Coast Johnson's Baby brand. And I had just come out of running a .com, and they asked, would you take that role? Would you integrate the two? So foolishly, I said yes. And I had this great boss at the time, and he gave me lots of room to lean back and think about the situation. And in thinking about the situation, I don't know if you remember Baby Center, but it was the first place pregnant women went to tell the world by telling the calculator on Baby Center that they were pregnant, and then get a week by week update. And often, I think it was 60 some odd % of women told Baby Center they were pregnant before they told their partner that they were pregnant. So it was a great little tool, and it had an e-commerce provision, but it was a screen tool. It was interacting online, and this was early in the stages of online content. And this boss said, well, is there more to Baby Center? Should there be a lean-in component, which is looking at the computer to understand what's happening with your pregnancy, and a sit back, lean back component, which is, I don't know what it is, figure it out. And we ran innovation sessions, and what we decided is there needed to actually be a print magazine from Baby Center, along with the lean-in content of getting online and asking specific questions. And I think that was probably 20-something years ago. That led me to be better at understanding that there's lots of ways to learn, and there's lots of ways to be seated with information. And one is leaning in, but the other is sitting back. And that magazine lasted about, I don't know, a decade, and then went away.
Yeah.
Always learning.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because to that point, and I am also somebody who likes to get stuff done. And that has always been a motivator for me. It's been a differentiator for me. But as you get into leadership, a lot of people get a lot of stuff done. And the way that I kind of build it into, that's in my DNA. So the way I build leaning back into what I do is I schedule that time. So you end up going from meeting to meeting to meeting, and you're like, okay, well, it's on my schedule, so I'm going to do it. And I think when I schedule it and I actually commit to that is the time I'm actually going to lean back and think about something, so that if a conflict comes up, I move that time so that I'm still thinking about it. That's the way I do it. And I try to think through like one big question. And we talk a lot about flipping the script. So where do we want to get to? And rather than thinking about like the incremental steps, think about all the way that I want to get to, and then what are the big things that I have to do to get there, and make sure that I'm spending the time on those things. But for me, I'm then able to kind of take that piece of me that likes to kind of check, but still do that lean back of like really forcing myself to think. And it's really hard in today's day and age, where it's really easy to just kind of flip over to your cell phone and get that dopamine hit by doing something that's easy. But I find that it's hard to sit there with problems, and it's hard to sit there and think about big things, but it is so much more rewarding at the end to know that I've done it, and you get bigger things out of it. So that's how I'm trying to work through that piece of it.
That's great advice. And what does that look like? Do you put a block on your calendar? What do you call it? Think time, or what do you call it?
I call it strategic thinking time. And so, and often what I do is I'll pick a question and that will be the question for that specific time.
And do you use any specific, I mean, I know coming up with the companies that you've been trained in, there are lots of ways to approach problems and challenges. Do you have a specific tool or an approach that you would tell people they should, if they're blocking time to think through a situation, they should first do X or first do Y, or it really is dependent on what the question is?
I think it's dependent on what the question is. I think, the idea of thinking through the future of what you want it to be and thinking back, I think in that time is really productive. This isn't exactly on the point that you're making, but oftentimes what I'll do is not do it in front of my computer, because it's my computer that I often find I can easily get distracted into task land. But if I turn around and sit with a piece of paper or go sit someplace and, put my phone to the side and just force myself to sit and think, I actually am able to spend more time and get bigger thinking, or go for a walk, right? Do something that gets you away from, I'll do that if I'm having a trouble at work thinking through a problem. I will go outside, I will go for a 10-minute walk without my phone, because I find that time allows me to think about something and look at a problem differently.
That's actually scientifically based. I just read a clinical study that said people are twice as likely to complete something if, instead of writing the to-do down on their phone, they actually write it on a piece of paper and they absorb it in a different way. And this was even true of younger people, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's going to be very interesting to see as time goes on for the people that have really done very little writing, what that's like in the future.
I mean, I don't know about with your kids, but with mine, I kept waiting for the bill for the books each semester, and I wasn't getting the bill. And finally, I said to my son, why am I not getting a bill for books? And he said, well, we pretty much don't use books. Like, he doesn't
The bills are big enough as it is.
I know, that's true. So switching gears a little bit, and let's talk about Ultima Health. And right here on the video, we'll put up the URL for Ultima Health. So whenever somebody watches this, they'll be able to see the incredibly expanding portfolio of SKUs that you're developing.
That's right.
Talk a little about the business, what people should know about it. I think I sent you a picture with me to my fitness class and hand it out, and then everybody always comes with their own the next week. So
love it. So it's a business. I'm super excited about it. That's one of the things that I love, is when you have a product that you believe in so deeply, it makes it that much more fun to go to work every day and do what you love. So Ultima Replenisher is an electrolyte drink that is 6 electrolytes. So it's a balanced formula of electrolytes, 0 sugar, 0 calories, 0 carbs, plant-based flavors and colors, so that you're putting something good in your body as you're trying to hydrate. And it's lower sodium than some of the others in the area, which means that you can drink it with confidence every day. And know that you're not going to, throw your sodium levels out of whack. And what I love about it is I have a personal belief that being healthy is so important, and I'm at my best when I'm feeling like I'm at my healthiest. But you have so much health information coming at you all the time, and it can feel really hard, right? Like it's always like there's one more thing that you have to do, and it can often feel like, oh my gosh, there's this one other thing that I have to do. What I love about Ultima is it's delicious and I look forward to it. So, our core belief is really that healthy shouldn't have to be hard. And that there are simple and fun ways that you can be healthy, and that's what we're all about. So I look forward to mine every day. We have a lot of flavors in our core portfolio. And then we have some health benefit items. We have a gut health and we have a crave killer one as well. And it's just a great way to, be a little bit healthier and feel good about what you're doing.
Yeah, crave killer, I thought was an amazing idea. Hopefully it's doing well for you.
Doing well, and it tastes great. And, it's another great one out there.
Excellent. Well, you talked about starting out as a soccer coach. This is something I learned about you a couple years ago, and I am sure that having been a soccer coach helps you be the kind of manager that you are. Are there key tenets from coaching a sports team that leaders should be thinking about integrating into their day-to-day as they coach and manage people, or as they are part of that team?
Yeah. That's it's a great question. It's, I coached at one point, I coached both soccer and basketball.
Hmm.
And I really liked coaching soccer more than I liked coaching basketball. Now, part of it is because I was much more of a soccer player than I was a basketball player. But they're very different philosophies if you think about it from a coaching perspective. In basketball, there's often, set offenses, set plays, there's timeouts. And it's much more, I'm going to call it like a coach controlled environment. Whereas soccer, you go through your trainings and that type of thing, but then, over that 90 minutes, you get one halftime break. So it's really about helping the players in advance in the training have the tools to make the decisions in the game. And so I think that is what I try to bring to what I do now, is that if we can kind of agree strategically on what we're trying to achieve, that gives everyone on the team more time and space to go run towards what they want to do. So they have more autonomy, they can have more creativity, they can have more curiosity about how they're going to solve that problem. It's just agreeing on the strategic parameters on how we're going to do that.
That does feel very much more like your leadership style than dictating a play.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
interesting parallel. Right about here in the podcast is where our listeners could be hearing your very own sponsorship message. Our subscribers are smart, talented, interested professionals. If you'd consider sponsoring Dauntless Leadership, we'd love to hear from you. I'm always available at lisa-kent.com. Thank you. In listening to you today, I have heard you talk about leadership attributes that are so important: leaning back, really digesting and understanding a situation, having endless curiosity and demonstrating that when it's necessary, taking time to think through strategic challenges on your own and really taking the time to do that. We did not talk about the numbers question. So I want to ask you, how did you get comfortable with numbers? And then what am I missing in terms of other leadership traits?
I think my comfort with numbers came from one, spending time learning about it. So both asking people for help, finding books, finding classes. I mean, there's tons of like little YouTube classes that can help you, that make you more comfortable, that you can then ask better questions. But you've got to ask the questions. That's how you learn anything, is that you have to be willing to say, I don't really understand how that works. And more often than not, people are really excited to help. So give them that gift of allowing them to help. With regards to leadership, the other thing that I would say to people that has been really important to me, and was probably a lesson that I learned way too late, is be true to yourself. There is only one you. And when you show up as your true self, you bring your very best. And you're not spending energy and time trying to fit into what you believe to be the right thing for that company or that situation, but you're really able to put your full self into it. So feel comfortable doing that. Don't be something that isn't true to you, because you'll really shine when you do that.
I had asked you to think about, is there a podcast or a book or something that you would recommend people striving to become a better leader, from getting out of school to now? I'm thinking about what's next for me. What kind of things do you think we should read, listen to?
So I have two books that were really somewhat transformational for me, and not necessarily business books, but books that help me think about things differently. And they're both in the same realm. One is The Happiness Advantage from Sean Aker, which is all about the idea of you actually have to, as a human being, the more you look at things in a positive light, the better you get at looking at things in a positive light. And then the other one is The Choice by Edith Eger. Have you ever read that?
No, but I read Sean Aker, but this is one I'll put on my list.
So she was actually a young girl who was taken and spent time at Auschwitz, and she's I think a psychologist now. She's like 98 years old. This amazing woman. And what it is about, or what my takeaway, one of my takeaways was, is she really kind of at one point mentally told herself, I have a choice on how I can look at this, and they can't take away what's in my head. And so I can look at things through that lens. And while they physically can be incredibly cruel and demanding, if I can control what's in my head, then I have the agency to control how I'm feeling about things. Now, obviously, that is, the worst possible situation to be in. But for me, it was like such a thing of like, gosh, if I think about things as a choice rather than things about things as a have to, I gain my agency, and then I feel better about what I'm doing. Because you always have a choice. You always have a choice on what you're doing or how you choose to think about things. And so for me, those things really kind of took the have to out of things. Like I have to do this next, or I have to do this, and turned it into, I'm going to get to go do that. And that in and of itself freed me to go try new opportunities.
Wow. Tell me again the name of the book and the author. I'll also super that.
The Choice, Edith Eger, I think is how you say her name. It's like Eger or Eiger.
Okay, I'll find it and put it up for listeners. And because you like that book, did you ever read Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning?
I have read parts of it, and he was her mentor. So they actually knew each other. Yes.
I mean, that's a book I like too. I mean, you really don't think about finding purpose and optimism in the worst place in the world, right? The concentration camp, but he did.
Right. And I think it's just, I mean, again, it's all about perspective. And if you can, the lens with which you look at things through, and then you apply that and say, how am I going to look optimistically at things, you find a lot more new opportunities.
That's a great lens for anybody at any age thinking about just how they look at their work and their life. One of the podcasts was with the panel of younger women, Gen Z and millennial. And I was just editing it and thinking about how we just look at things so differently. And there's so much that I could learn from them. And I think it's about how do you shift the lens a little so that you look at a situation differently. Have you had a situation in your career where it hasn't maybe worked out the way that you would have liked, and how did you handle it?
Yeah, I mean, a lot. And I think early in my career, I really thought of things as a sprint more than a marathon, and I would get angry and I would go and, be, vocal about it in a way that wasn't necessarily leaning back and kind of looking at the big picture and what I wanted to do. So I think that's happened more recently. There's a couple of things that I think about when things have gone. One, is there a learning there, right? This whole idea of failing forward and keep moving forward. Okay, well, what happened and what can I learn from it? But also keeping the end game in mind, right? So because everything is a marathon. So if I think about things through the big picture and where I want to be, I think that's how you really can frame things in a way that helps you to get there. So how do you respond rather than react?
Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you wanted to make sure we discussed on this podcast?
Well, You haven't asked me what I do for fun, which I think is important to my life and who I am. So I'm married and I'm a mother of 3 boys, and I get a lot of joy from that. I still play soccer, which is slightly crazy, but a lot of fun. And those types of things, and keeping that harmony, for me, helps me show up better every day.
So that's great advice for me, because I don't typically ask that question, and now I'm going to ask it. What do you do for fun? You know, I was thinking about that as I'm in this new phase of my life. What do I love to do? I love to read. I love to learn from people I respect and trust. So this is actually fun for me.
That's awesome.
And I am so grateful that you were here with us today. And I wanted to say thank you for spending time with me.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm super excited that you're doing this, because I do think that this fits into just who you are and what makes you the magical you that you are.
Oh, thank you. And as I like to close with the immortal words of my mom, Arlene Barnett, you don't have to know what you're going to be when you grow up, just what you're going to do next. So see y'all next time. Thank you.